So the first question, Bill, is obviously we're talking about Old Town Carnival and Old Town Carnival Week, but Hastings used to have two carnivals, and there's a story behind that as to how that happened, and obviously then what happened to the Newtown Carnival.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So we start from the beginning of the Hastings Carnival, as it was called, and I was on the committee at the time. I'd been asked to go on the committee because I've been connected with the revellers earlier on. I'll go back to that later on. So the Hastings Carnival was quite a popular carnival because it was started after the war to get the town cracking again, and it was a tonic, really, rather like nowadays with the flu. Anyway, the carnival was quite well supported at the time by the Rotary Club and the Hastings Round Table and a lot of local businesses. So it flourished. Unfortunately, though, over the years, commercial advertising crept in to a large extent. And what happened was the public was not too enthusiastic with seeing the same advertising float, a national advertising float, come round the carnival 2 or 3 years later. The lack of interest in that gradually led to the losing basically of crowds. Also, the hard work, as you all know, connected with carnivals, was beginning to get a bit too much for some of the people taking part, organising it. We had a very good committee at the time, though. We had a police superintendent, the borough engineer, Charles Cowling, and it was a flourishing carnival at the time. The only trouble was, to my opinion, was the routes were rather long.
Yes.
We had various choices of starts and finishes. One was Alexandra Park, two was Grosvenor Gardens, Warrior Square, and I think Station Approaches at one time and Baybrook Road. All these were start points of the carnival, finishing either at Grosvenor Gardens, Warrior Square. So there was a general angle of a lot of various venues that were tried. So it wasn't for the want of trying. However, gradually the commercial advertising led to lack of support by the crowds. There was no comedy in the carnival. It was just commercial. And so when the Old Town Carnival started, one of the first things they said was no commercial advertising.
Right.
Which, to a large extent, has been kept going. We didn't mind social clubs from various big firms putting their social club and mentioning the firm, but no blatant commercial advertising, which seemed to be a success. So that was one of the reasons. So gradually over the years, the carnival deteriorated, the crowds deteriorated, the funds deteriorated, and the ability of people to want to work for the Hastings Carnival deteriorated slightly. At the same time, they discussed the route and decided to turn the carnival, which normally started on the St Leonard side, went round past the memorial to the fish market. All of a sudden, the committee decided that they would no longer include the fish market on the route. So they turned at the memorial, completely segregating the Old Town. The Old Town was completely left out of the carnival route. And seeing that a number of organisations in the Old Town, including the Winkle Club, were participants in the Hastings Carnival and provided entertainment and fun, which a carnival should do, they were left out. So there was quite a protest within the Old Town. And as we all know, one of the big things for getting crowd enthusiasm is protests. We've seen a lot of it just lately.
Yeah.
So the protest from the Old Town said, here, they're leaving us out. We'd do a damn carnival of our own. And put two fingers up basically to the Hastings organisation. I don't think at the time the Hastings Carnival thought that the Old Town Carnival would succeed. But however, gradually, having started out a protest, and I'll come back a little bit to that later, gradually the carnival was deteriorating and the Old Town Carnival had been born. When the Old Town Carnival was born, it was, as I say, just out of protest, and everybody said, we'll do our own carnival. The result was a committee was formed, which I was invited to stand on, being in two camps at once, more or less. And it was rather difficult, but however.
So you were hunting with the horses and running with the hounds. I didn't realise that.
Yeah. Yes. So anyway, the Old Town Carnival started, and we met in the Fisherman's Club, and then the various people from the Old Town discussed what we do and how we do it. First of all came where are we going to get money from? We had no money at all. And so various businessmen said, we'll chip in, which was very good. And the next thing that happened, someone suggested, well, we need a band for a carnival. So someone said, what sort of band should we have? So Stan Barry piped up, there's only one band in the British Isles, and that's the Royal Marines. In those days, the Royal Marines cost about £400 or £500, which is unbelievable cost now. You think of nearly £8,000 or £10,000. So anyway, someone said, the Royal Marines. He said, the Royal Marines. So the next thing, we said, well, we can't afford them. One of the businessmen popped up and said, yes, you can. It's a cheque. Get the Royal Marines. Imagine starting a carnival sort of 2 months ahead and someone says, we'll give you the best band in the country to lead it. The printers in the Old Town, Guy and Jones, printed programmes, and the next minute, the Old Town Carnival was formed. So that's how the Old Town Carnival started.
Wow.
I don't think there's anything more I can say about the reasons for the Hastings Carnival folded. But at the time, Hastings Carnival was running as well as the Old Town Carnival for about 3 years, I think. The Old Town Carnival was running parallel to the Hastings Carnival. Gradually, the popularity of the Old Town Carnival superseded the Hastings Carnival, and eventually it folded up for lack of support. So that was the end of the carnival.
Yes, I used to watch the Hastings one from the bottom of Elphinstone Road at the Park Gates, because they used to turn round at that point. Yes. So
we back at the park.
Yeah, that's right. I used to enjoy that. But I think you're right. I mean, it was all obviously big lorries, and that's something I'd like to come back to later, particularly when we talk about West Country Carnival. And then I changed to watching it on the seafront along by St Leonard's. And I just from hearing you speak and kind of remembering, it's a much more distant thing to watch than when I used to stand outside the Stag, and you're much closer to the floats in the Old Town.
I don't think the Hastings Carnival ever went through the actual Old Town. It always turned at the
the Iceland.
Market.
Yes, but well, I was thinking, but because I was a spectator in those days, I was obviously smaller. I now think that was a more distant thing.
Yes,
you get closer to it in the Old Town. When the Old Town one started, you get closer to the people walking by in their costumes.
Yes, there's no doubt about it. There was quite big crowds when you consider the council in those days had deck chairs more or less from the bathing pool along past Warrior Square to the pier, 2 rows of deck chairs for the crowds to watch the carnival.
Yes.
Can you imagine that nowadays?
Yes.
So that was the strength of support for the carnival.
Yes.
And having taken part in both, I know what it was like.
Yes. absolutely. So not only were you on the organising committees of both of them, you're absolutely right when you said about taking part, because a lot of friends, I'm thinking of Rosemary, for example, talking about going up with the guides and making things. So how did you then end up being, the pair of you, being the creators of these massive floats?
Well, it all started a very long time ago in Priory Street, where we had our headquarters. We had the cellars underneath, which is now the Saga building. On the Scout Hall wall was a picture of a carnival float, which the Scouts had made in the 1930s, a big prehistoric monster. When I finished my national service, I'd been connected with the carnival before that with the Revellers. I'd better start with the Revellers. The Revellers was my introduction to the carnival. Johnny Woodham's one of the famous people from the theatre, the White Rock Theatre, an actor and a marvellous person connected with the theatre business in Hastings, formed the Revellers, whose sole object was to raise money for the Hastings Carnival. We had a makeshift band comprising of some good musicians and some very bad ones, and our sole object was to raise money for the Hastings Carnival throughout the year.
Right.
As I say, we had our own band and very unorthodox methods of raising money. One of them was to close the A21 at the Harrow and to the traffic and get everybody to buy immunity badges. Imagine trying to stop the A21 nowadays. As well as that, we visited all the functions, the big dinners and balls in the town, and there was quite a thriving tourist industry and business industry in the town with hotels, the Queen's especially. And we gate crashed all those functions to raise money for charity, complete with our band. Imagine sitting down to dinner and then you heard a huge racket outside. In came the Revellers with their collection boxes and made such a shindy that the people paid very good money to get rid of us. Johnny Woodham was such a good organiser and connected with the White Rock that the White Rock Theatre wasn't immune from our visits. And what used to happen, Johnny Woodham's found a show that was going on and arranged with the theatre manager an absolute spot-on timing event, so that during the interval we had assembled in the White Rock. As soon as the interval curtain went down, we burst in like the crazy gang, marched around the place with our band and our collection boxes and created merry hell for about 5 minutes and then disappeared off the scene, having collected quite a lot of money.
Brilliant. Keith, I'm hoping you're listening to these ideas. Yes, I think. What did you play, Bill?
The Revellers were an ideal protest thing for young people. They carried on for many years, but unfortunately, gradually, as people got older, they died out. With more or less the death of Hastings Carnival, they disappeared. So that was one of the things. So that was my introduction. After finishing national service, we decided to build this float of the prehistoric monster that was on our Scout Hall wall. It was done with pioneering poles recovered from the woods out where I live now at the moment, Three Oaks. A friendly farmer decided to give us some poles. So we had them, he cut them down for us, and we put them on trek carts and took them all the way to Priory Street to make the prehistoric monster that we entered in the carnival in the 1950s, the middle 1950s. After that, the Scouts decided to produce several more floats, and I'm just trying to think off of hand. We borrowed bomb trolleys, which were supplied by the local timber firm, who had them after the war. If you see pictures of aircraft taking off, loading up with bombs, these trolleys carried about 5 ton in weight and were ideal for building floats on because they were low and very, very strong.
Wow.
we borrowed those from the local timber merchant. The advantage was that they had a handle which went down and break the trolley, but we could build a very big trolley. One of the notable ones was a scout badge celebrating the 50 years of scouting. There's a picture somewhere of me with it. And the kangaroo, which Dudley Trow, one of the Bonfire Boys, was part as a junior in, and we built a huge kangaroo. The year that we did the kangaroo, we sat in the scout hall, and we couldn't think of a theme because the theme that year was leap year. And
Brilliant!
And our scoutmaster turned around, put his pipe down, and said, "Well, why not do a kangaroo?" So we decided to do a kangaroo. And of course, in those days, the scouts were clued up on pioneering poles and lashings. So the poles were used again to make a kangaroo. Improvisation was the watchword in those days. We had no money to do anything. And the kangaroo comprised of a pioneering structure about 14 or 16 foot high, covered in rusty chicken wire netting that we'd scrounged from a farm on the ridge, and covered in turned around fertilizer bags painted with brown distemper. The kangaroo won best in the show because it was right on the theme.
Yes.
Also beat one of the local big television firms, Colster Branch, who spent hundreds of pounds on their float. We spent about £25 or £20 at the very most.
Wow.
The most notorious float that we had with the Scouts was the rocket.
Now, I'm going to ask you about the rocket because I know I love this story. It's just that I don't know whether you heard my clocks chiming then.
No. Yeah.
Oh, that's all right then. I was worried that the clocks chiming were cutting across you. So, yes, we need the full infamous rocket story.
The rocket was built along near Skinner's Sheds, where the old tram depot was at one time. And the rocket was about 30 foot long, mounted on a Ford 1000 weight van, which we cut in halves and extended by 20 feet on the chassis. So in other words, the Ford van that should be 15 feet turned out to be 25 feet long. We mounted a rocket on it, and it was covered in bituminous paper, and on the back of it had some elongated oil drums, big oil drums to simulate the actual rocket motors. I had made some chemicals on hessing to put in the rockets, so that when we got to the judging, we could light them and the rockets smoked. The judging was at Grosvenor Gardens. We turned up with this huge rocket, all dressed as spacemen. I think the theme was adventure or space anyway. We based it on the theme. The rocket, when we got to the judging site at Grosvenor Gardens, we put the chemicals in it, and it started smoking. It looked very realistic, smoke pouring out. The judges couldn't avoid giving us best in the show. As we started off, the smoke diminished. The Scouts got a bit impatient, and I said, "Whatever you do, don't put too much in the drums." But gradually they didn't believe what I said and added a lot more than they should have done. So when we got to Marine Court, the rocket was really smoking. It was really looking like it was just going. The crowd were enthusiastic. When we got to Warrior Square, all of a sudden there was a flash and the whole thing burst into flames, complete. Of course, being made of bituminous paper, it was like a Zeppelin burning on the front. We didn't realise at the time that there was sediment of oil in the oil drums, and the result was that when we heated it up with too much stuff, it burnt. The Daily Express newspaper correspondent was down there on holiday, leaned out the window and took a picture, and we had the only time that a carnival float in Hastings has ever got the front page of the Nationals, and we got a big picture of Scout disaster, rocket disaster at Carnival, and there's a picture. The result was that the fire, after we put it out, burnt the tyres off the extended forward, so we had bare rims. Having put the fire out and with the smouldering wreckage, we carried on with the tow ropes, and scouts pulled it past the saluting base, which was at the pier with the White Rock Steps. The people who were on the judging position thought, how the hell did that not get best in show with the smoke and smoke? And all I had was a loud hailer, and said that we burnt up our entry. Seeing that the carnival dispersed at the park, Hollingsworth were very kind to accommodate the remains of the Ford and put it in their wreckage to save us trying to dismantle it at the park, which had been a major job. So that was wonderful, really.
Yeah, brilliant. So, what year was that, Bill?
That must have been about 1958, 59.
About 58, something like that. After that, that was the last Scout one I did, because our Scout troop was soon disbanded because we lost our hall in Priory Street to the church hall. They sold it and it became a bingo hall. The cellars where we met eventually became a nightclub. I think it was called Denny's, or Denny's, I think it was, the nightclub in the basement. That was where we had our headquarters. So from then, I was working, Benny said, well, why don't you help my guys? So immediately we transferred to the guys and produced a carnival float in about 3 weeks. And we had another van then. Which van did we have?
Oh, it was a red one in the garden, I think.
Oh, we had a red post office van, and we did exactly the same. So we produced another float, which won Best in the Show, based on adventure depicting the guide chalet at Ardlebode.
Best in class, not best in
Best
show.
in class, Ardlebode. The next year we did the guide anniversary of their Jubilee. So we did a big birthday cake with a map of Great Britain on. When we built the first one at Grosvenor Gardens, when we were assembled, we heard a light plane coming along with its engine spluttering, and the next thing it had ditched in the sea opposite the float. It had come nearly landed on the Carnival, but it ditched in the sea, just in about 6 or 8 foot of water. And luckily the lifeboat and the Coast Guards were there in the Carnival in force. A big rope was organised, the crew were rescued, and then a tug-of-war team was organised, attached to the aircraft, and the rumour had it that by the time the tug-of-war had finished pulling the aircraft out of the water, it had got caught on one of the groins, and they did more damage than the actual crash.
Oh no!
The Carnival started off a little bit later after the excitement, but it was quite an exciting thing to see the aircraft coming in and gradually losing height and thinking, blimey, where's that going to finish up? So
oh my God.
So having done the guides in the Hastings Carnival, we also were doing a floating, we did the Ra, Thor Heidel's Ra, which was more or less a scale model of the straw papyrus reed boat that he crossed the Pacific in way back. So that got us another Best in Show. We then carried on doing, which was the next one we did? We did the Guide Jubilee for the Silver Jubilee of the Golden Jubilee of the Guides. Silver Jubilee, Golden Jubilee of the Guides. Anyway, so we carried on. When the Old Town Carnival started, we produced a 40-foot whale. that was quite a star of the show. Got us best in its class. And the peculiar thing was, a week later, I was drinking in the sun, and one of the local fishermen, Ted Tyrrell, came up and said, "Hi, Bill. You know that damn well you built?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Do you realise you got the flukes round the wrong way?" I said, "What?" He said, "Yes." He said, "You got it looking like a mackerel." He said, "The fluke should be flat." Nobody had noticed
Oh,
it in the old town.
oh.
In the whale itself, we had two 40-gallon drums filled up with water with two stirrup pumps, and my son and his friend were in there. And when from the tractor, Benny and I shouted, "There she blows!" They pumped the water. Two 40-gallon drums full of water around the crowd. Nobody protested a bit. The
I'm
next,
not surprised you've kept winning with all these floats.
actually, because the guides won 2 best in show in the first Old Town Carnival, there was a little bit of resentment built up, or rivalry, and it led to the fact that the Fishermen's Club and some of the other organisations built some wonderful floats. In the history that I did, I've mentioned them all, so I can't mention them now, but I can later on. One of the more telling floats we built for the guides again was a Hastings trawler, based on the year. That year was 1972. We depicted a trawler in 1872 hauling up its nets, absolutely brimming with fish. We did 1972 with half fish and half plastics, and we predicted 2072 with a whole mass of plastic. We were miles ahead of our time in our theme, and unfortunately it's coming to fruition, really.
Oh, it so is, yes.
It's a little bit of a worrying thought when you look at it, but it was funny we did it. The trawler was more or less the same size as a Hastings trawler, and built, I think that was on an ordinary low loading trailer. We carried on, and later on, the great rivals was Bob Morgan with his famous trains.
Yes.
They took the show. He took them to Jersey and various places around the country, and they were a credit to the town.
Absolutely.
We later on did the Albertine, which was one of the best ones we ever did, more or less a full-size boat, again on a trailer of the pleasure boat that left from the opposite the Queen's Hotel there. And it was marvellous because the sails were made of mosquito netting from Malcolm Mitchell's, the local government contractor, and so that we could do a complete set of sails and the wind didn't offer any resistance, but we had the effect of the sails. So that was a good one. And then we finished up with another very good guide float. That was for the Hastings Motorboat and Yacht Club. We did 2 more, Rock and All Roger, a giant octopus, and also Fantasy Island, which we based later on we based the Winkle Club Fantasy Island on, from the boat club. And also one of the best pedestrian entries ever done was for the Golden Jubilee, the Golden Coach with all pedestrians. It's the only time that Best in Show was won by a pedestrian entry.
Oh, I didn't know that. You've told us about some of the most memorable floats, talked about scout floats, then moving across to guide floats, having started off with revelers floats into that there. So I know that last year you still won Best in Show. That's a recurring theme. But last year you won it with the winner.
Sorry, the sound's going a bit.
Uh-oh, I can't hear you.
The sound's going back. I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
I can.
No, I've lost sound for Bill. Hang on.
It's gone very quiet.
I can't hear Bill. We've lost you, Bill, at the moment. Can't hear your sound.
Okay.
Yeah. Hang on. It's because Keith went to put the kettle on, I'm sure. I can't hear Bill at all.
I can hear Bill.
Right.
Am
So,
I
oh
close
no,
enough?
no.
No.
Right, Bill.
No.
Stop video mute.
I can hear Bill. It's this end. It's
Oh, I
Heather.
can hear you now,
Right.
Keith. Right, Heather.
I'll turn my headset up.
Unplug and plug in your headset, Heather.
Okay. Right, I can hear Keith.
So you should
I
be able to
can
hear
hear
Bill.
you.
Oh, thank goodness.
Okay, I'll go back to making a cup of tea.
Is it coming through now?
Yes, thank you. Yes, I have trouble with the connection at the other end of my headphones. It
Oh, okay.
pulls out. So,
So,
Winkle Club.
yes. Now,
Winkle Club.
my connection with the Winkle Club float, or
Yes, with the floats, because for another occasion, I think we've got a whole separate series, I think, on you and Winkle Club, haven't we? But so I know that to bring us right up to date, 2019, you won last year with the Winkle Club float in the most atrocious weather.
pardon?
Most atrocious weather.
Yes, it was rather boisterous, to say the least.
Hang on.
Oh, we've got an alarm going off now.
Whose alarm is it?
Not
We can hear an alarm going off. Are you all right there, you two?
Oh, hang on. It's my phone.
It's all right. It's
Oh,
fine.
it's his phone.
Okay.
I'm not ringing. I don't think it's me ringing you, is it?
No.
No, that's anyway. Briefly on the Winkle Club float, then.
Yes, please.
Yes. Well, we decided to enter the carnival this year because it was the 50th anniversary of the Old Town Carnival, and to commemorate the fact that the first one, Benny and I were together and did it, and so this year Benny did quite a lot of the work. Anyway, result was typical of the organisation. We drew it on the back of a cigarette packet, really wonderful sketches, and again, to convince, it's the first time that I'd done one for the Winkle Club. And so the Winkle Club, we were very enthusiastic, and they got together, and in spite of my sketchy drawings, managed to get something like a scale. And very often it's a question of putting a piece of wood up and saying that looks about right, and then taking it down again.
Right.
Result was that we decided to this time borrow a very big boat trailer from Rye Harbour Marine, who were very kind. They lent us a big trailer free of charge, and we had to go over and collect it, which was quite a job in the first place. Anyway, having got the trailer into the garden just about, we set about building it. And if you imagine on our front lawn, we had at one time a 12-foot long champagne bottle, and the beginning of the backdrop and everything like that. And gradually it went together, and so we produced the Winkle Club float. It had a champagne bottle dripping allegedly water into a pool with two old people looking at it, and the theme of the carnival was
Off with the old.
out with the
Oh,
old.
yes, it was. That was the theme.
Out
Yes.
with the old, but we added a little bit, but the future is up to you. So we
Yes.
basically combined the two sides of the story, with an old couple looking at the water coming out of the champagne, sitting in tranquility of the garden, where behind the wall was a huge screen with some youngsters sitting down on a over couch, looking at a screen with all visual aids on their heads. In other words, sitting there doing precisely nothing. At the back of the thing, we had save our planet, plant a tree, and also we had wind turbines on the back of that, and a pile of rubbish that the people had sat, more or less sat in watching the television. So it said, "Take your litter home."
Yes.
One of the other slogans, which caused quite a lot of interest, was 2 imitation tombstones with "In loving memory of Harold Place toilets, rest in P," which again was a bit of a subtle hint to 1 or 2 people. Probably means that I shan't be in the New Year's honours.
Yeah, well, quite well. We all missed those toilets, and I couldn't believe how quickly they got demolished. I mean, no sight of them at all now. Yeah.
The peculiar thing, having been used to building floats, we assembled a rock and roll boat club at my boat club, but the wind was so strong
Wasn't it?
I picked boxes of dahlias, prize blooms to decorate it with, and unfortunately the blooms, as soon as we tied them to the thing, blew away, so they probably finished up at Dungeness Nest. But anyway, we got to the assembly point, which was Rockanour, and we decided to pull in beside the Coast Guard station so that we had a maximum shelter before we entered the carnival. And although the wind was strong, it was forecast to decrease slightly from the west, so we knew that we weren't on too bad. All the time we were heading into it, the main danger was the going broadside onto it when we rounded the fountain, so we didn't worry too much about that. But the amazing thing was we got it assembled, and I was just doing the finishing touches under quite a bit of pressure. And a young lady's police sergeant came up to me and said, "We're thinking of taking your float out because of the wind." I said, "What's wrong?" She said, "Well, the bottle's resting on the trestle." I said, "The trestle is 4x2 building joists." I said, "If you break that, if the wind breaks that," I said, "you'll be having to pick cars out of the sea at Rockanour, so don't worry about us, we're all right."
Absolutely, absolutely. And you've also reminded me that I know your lovely flowers have decorated Happy Harold. And are those your flowers on the windowsill behind you?
Yes, yes.
I thought they might be. And we've always
Actually,
looked forward to the flowers
such
in
a
the
good
count.
It's not such a good year because this year we grow flowers and vegetables for the Women's Institute, and of course, because of the virus, everything is closed down, and we're in serious worries about whether the market will ever carry on again, because one of the stipulations that the Women's Institute organisation has put is that no people under 70 over 70 are allowed to take part in it, which is going to be very threatening. However, things may improve, so we live in hope. That's all we can do.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of people worse off than we, so we're lucky in some ways.
Yeah, and yes, and definitely coping in 2020 is something, and the future. You've mentioned both of those things. You know, is something I want to ask you in a minute. But before we get there, they kind of round off that journey. In that time, you also have become the president of the Carnival Association.
Yes.
So can you tell us how that happened, when that happened, and what that means, and how obviously Old Town Carnival Week itself developed around that too?
Yes. Well, the carnival, as I say, came about by protest and enthusiasm with the Old Town. You wouldn't have got anything done without the enthusiasm. People rolled up their sleeves, and every time you wanted anything, they did. I've become president after the passing of Bab Mugridge, who took part in all of the carnivals. Her daughter was a carnival queen, and also she organised everything. She was the grandmother of carnivals in some ways, doing everything. But when she passed on, I was asked to become life president, which I did, accepted, and I'm very proud of the fact that I've been connected. I like to think that I'm a hands-on person who, when I see a float, I don't only look at the float, I know the work that's gone in. I know the hours of time that has to be spent. I know the financial angles, which is very telling nowadays.
Yep.
In my early days of building carnival floats, we were notorious at scrounging, improvising, which is unfortunately, when you see the amount of materials that are tipped, youth organisations and bodies could produce carnival floats cheaply and reasonably. It's time. Time is the important factor in today's life. Nobody seems to have time to do anything, and the result is that you don't get the people willing to give time to produce something to provide entertainment or something else. So I've done my best to encourage a number of people to take part in carnivals, but also to realise that building floats can be great fun. You
Yes.
have the difficulties, but it does unite people. When you're all together with a paintbrush, at one turn there we were building a float, and the head postmaster of Hastings at the time, whose wife was the guide district commissioner, was slapping paint, and someone mistook the effigy that we were building and gave him a bit of a coat of paint. We all burst out laughing.
Bill, you seem to be bouncing around a bit. I don't know what's happening there. Your image is bouncing around, and we seem to have lost the light on you because the sun's moved around.
Better.
Maybe a bit more light if we can.
That's a bit more light. Is it enough?
I've got a big light. If you'd like to take a minute or two, I've got a big light.
No, that's all right now. We can see you now. And stop fidgeting.
Yes,
Is that all right? Is that?
so it's been a great privilege to be the president of the carnival, and I hope I can continue for a few more years. But as you can hear probably by my voice, 88 years is beginning to wear a bit.
But I mean, how long ago? It's not that long ago. You were still cycling up Crown Lane in the bike race.
Yes, I managed to do that when I was about 80, I think.
84.
84, I think.
84. And obviously, I know you're in your red jacket that you wear, and you lead the dignitaries now in the carnival with your lobster hat on your face. So yes, don't you dare think about retiring. You keep going.
Yes. I think you've got one article on the West Country Carnival. Do you want me to?
Well, that's just what I was going to lead into, because you have taught both Keith and I on this score, because obviously your pedigree in English Carnival is so evident with what you've just been telling us through, and sharing your memories with. But I can remember you telling us quite a few years ago, saying something not quite on the lines, but you can't say you know about English Carnival until you've been to the West Country, and so you may just go there. And oh my golly, thank goodness you did. My man's just walked out with me. So I know you used to go a lot, and with West Country Carnival then is that conversation and that wider knowledge about carnivals in England, about what makes them different from the Rio carnivals, the Mardi Gras carnivals, and all those things, and a whole sub-element which we haven't yet talked about, and that is certainly something we've learnt. Again, Keith and I have had to learn a lot about. Sorry, this is a really big rambling thing that I'm asking, and that is where the courts fit into that too, because I know they don't have the courts in the West Country. So any of those, and any pearls of wisdom that round up those things would be really helpful.
Okay, well, I first was introduced to the West Country Carnival by Andrew Litscombe from the Stag, and Bill Russell, who have been big supporters of it, and they showed me the video, and I was enthralled. And so the next time when they organised a mini coach down there, I joined them, and I think Benny and I both went, didn't we, and joined them. And I couldn't believe it. You yourselves know what I'm talking about. I always used to come back and say to Hastings, when I was talking about carnivals, one of the tractors in the West Country Carnival is so well decorated that it won't invest in the show, and possibly one of the generators that follows the trailer
Yes.
still will invest in the show of our carnival. We're so far behind. But each carnival throughout the world has its own laws, its own finances, its own method, and its own support. The West Country Carnival has came up over the years, and seen some of the early pictures of the West Country Carnival. It was on tractors and horses and hay carts, similar to the early days of the Old Town Carnival, or the carnivals in Sussex, as you might put it. But the advantage of the West Country Carnivals is that some towns have the equivalent of a football team to support one float. When you consider that one of the floats in the West Country Carnival may contain 20,000 full-size light bulbs, with a generator that would run a small town like Battle on one float, pulled two tractors, it gives you an idea of the scale. The fact that the street lighting goes off when the carnival comes through, thinking it's daylight, gives an impression of the light. It's something like coming from outer space. The whole area around Glastonbury glows at night when the West Country Carnival comes. And it visits several towns, I think about 5, finishing up at Weston-super-Mare in the West Country Carnival circuit.
Mm-hmm.
Each carnival float has a supporters club bigger than a small town's football team, all working towards the choreography, the lighting, the assembly, the mechanics, and also the West Country Carnival associations have the facilities, because they bring so much to tourists. Thousands of tourists come to the West Country in November, of all things.
Yes.
It's not carnival weather, but they come rain or shine. But the West Country Carnival authorities have rented or given to the carnival huge factory complexes where they can assemble the floats in the dry, in the winter, in the dark. Also, which is unusual in the West Country Carnival, is the fact that a load of the figures, such as animals and horses or figures, sometimes are made of fiberglass, are swapped over each year between carnival associations. So you get bigger speed decor. If you go to several carnivals, you may be seeing horses at one time, Pegasus with wings and mythical, the next thing entering in the Grand National. And it's amazing. So they have a swapping, but also they have the engineering facilities in these huge factory complexes for young people to learn skills of carnival making, which is a thing that carries on for several generations now. So the tradition of the West Country Carnival is something to be unique, probably in Great Britain.
Oh, absolutely. And you've touched on one of our other loves when you mentioned November, is of course Sussex Carnival. We call Sussex Bonfire. When we're taken to the streets, we're not using the light bulbs, we're still using flames, more like your rocket. And I think that's that lovely link between all those three things that we do. So while we're talking about specifically English things, more that I personally know from the Kent carnivals, and you might know a wider spread than I do, and that is as you said, you've got these set pieces. You've mentioned that a couple of times in some of the carnivals, and there's the courts, and that's a current a thing that we're in Hastings, that we've got current moving forward into taking into that next step we're going to talk about. That's 2021 and beyond. So what do you, I don't know, what's your perspective with the courts?
The courts, I think, are one of the most useful things that the carnival possesses, because they enlarge your coverage and advertising along the south coast. Bob Morgan was one of the ones who encouraged the courts, and under his supervision they thrived, mainly because he had the skills and the ability and the time to take them to the furthest extent. Unfortunately, we come back to the old problem of time. The fact that people haven't very often, they're not retired, they've still got to earn a living, and so to take people to courts to visit other towns is a bit of a difficult problem. Again, you come to the problem always that prevails is, where can we assemble floats for Carnival Queens?
Yes.
I've produced several floats for the Carnival Queen individually, and they were very often pulled by the Hastings Tigers from the Nelson Tigers. We didn't rely on transport, we just pulled them around the route, which again saves money, saves the fact that you've got to have a motor vehicle and insurance. Yeah,
and it's also more entertaining to watch.
Yes, and also it engages more people.
Yeah.
Out of, unfortunately, the Nelson Tigers are no longer in existence, but the courts do a wonderful job for the town. Our visiting queen attracts the name of Hastings. If it's a good float, it attracts people to come to Hastings and say, well, if that's the float that we get in a Hastings Carnival, then we'll come and see the whole carnival. Over the years, I've watched the young ladies take part in, and they're proud to represent their towns. And it's a marvellous step off the self-confidence for the young ladies to take part in the carnival processions and processes, and long may it continue. Unfortunately, again, time comes into it, expenses. Sometimes a personal opinion is, if the town could spend so much on some things, then why not produce a decent float that can be towed around to boost our town?
Yes, and I think also with what you were saying with the West Country Carnival, when you talked about families and that rolling on and giving people skills in making floats, we also have seen those young people in the courts, with the experiences they get through that, how they have been very grateful for the confidence building and a new perspective on things with what they get with the court experience, that they definitely value it. And it's the only thing that the carnival, it's the only thing that you know that you put on it in your own carnival, if that makes sense. You know, everything else is other people are joining in, but it's the carnival committee, the float, that's the float that that's in our own carnival. I've said that in a very clunky way.
Yes, I think there has been a time where we had six or seven floats from various towns, and that boosts the carnival. There's no doubt about it. If you lose the carnival courts, you lose a big percentage in colour
of that
of the carnival.
Those set pieces.
That is the unfortunate part of it.
So the Kent carnivals have also had difficulties, haven't they? And we haven't seen Bexhill.
everywhere has had difficulties, and again, it's can we get the young people to take part in it? Can we, in my age group, or younger, with plenty of energy and plenty of semi-spare time, not really spare time, but giving the time to do it,
Yeah.
is a different thing than having the spare time.
Yes, recognising the worth of it.
It's a very difficult thing to get over to the young people that are so busy paying their mortgage and looking after their houses and so forth, and especially this year and coming years, it's going to be very, very difficult. But on the other hand, enthusiasm can be in various ways for Carnival. Now, in Germany, I visited the Cologne Carnival a couple of times.
Oh, I've never done that one.
I was amazed at the number of schools that enter, all with their own handmade dresses and clothes, sometimes with their own school band, and you get 400 children all from one school, all the whole school turning up dressed in fancy dress to parade in the carnival. And if you can encourage schools and youth organisations to do that, you've got a carnival. Also, you can get the carnival queens floats and things done by volunteers. If you can only find the facilities to engage these people, after all, you've only got to look at what usually happens during the school holidays, a bout of vandalism, where when we were doing floats, we knew at least there was about 20 children that weren't doing anything but building floats.
And getting that community spirit, that sense of achievement, working together, and fun. Because you've also mentioned fun. So that's a really brilliant way of rounding up with the fact that 2020, the reason why we're talking now is because 2020 is a bit of a weird year, and Carnival can't take place because of the social distancing, and so Carnival Day will be going out virtually, and this will be going out virtually with that. So what do you see then, once we're back together, what do you see as the future for Carnival, particularly in Hastings, and the way forward?
We need a lot more support from local businesses.
And the council.
And the council do give us a certain amount of support. Sometimes you think they could do a little bit more when you see what they're spending money on. That's just a personal opinion. But I do think that if the businesses, and after all, we all realise what it has cost businesses in this year with the loss of Jack in the Green, the motorbikes, the various activities that normally are part of our social calendar, as it were, we all realise the potential, the amount of money that we've lost. Now, why not this coming year try and consolidate and get back to the stage of spending money on carnivals and things to get mentioned on the map? After all, the motorcyclists didn't come to Hastings just because it's Hastings. They come because there's an atmosphere and something like that here. They had Jack in the Green. They have the bonfire. They come to Hastings for that. If the carnival goes, and it could easily go through lack of finances or lack of support, carnivals are in jeopardy in some areas, where other areas in the world, they're flourishing. Very often carnivals don't require thousands of pounds throwing at them, but they do require money to get them going, as it were. And I think there's definitely a need for the local businesses, if they want to encourage Hastings to be Hastings, they've got to come forward with support.
Yes, absolutely. And that reminds me of something that D-Day always says, the pound that goes around, in that, yes, any attraction, a carnival will always bring people in to a place. They will spend money, they'll buy drinks and food. We want to collect for our charities. And it goes, yes, absolutely. It feeds it's only a positive thing, and it's also and the community gets so much there. Well, that's been absolutely brilliant. Is there anything that you think, oh, why haven't we spoken about? Is there any final thoughts that you want to add?
I think you must appreciate the Old Town Carnival is for the Old Town, basically, and the fact that the Old Town, unfortunately, by its construction, doesn't lend itself to some types of carnival. The West Country Carnival wouldn't get one vehicle down. You just can't. Each carnival is its own individual. It's rather like the boats on the beach were adapted to the Hastings beach, no other beach. And the thing is, the Old Town Carnival was adapted to the Old Town. It must be encouraged and flourish. Maybe one day, if things improve, another Hastings Carnival could start up. The advantage of the carnival, the old carnival, was that it had an open front line and unrestricted height and width of roads, more or less around the whole route. So bigger floats could be built, more initiative can be used. You've only got to look at the pictures recently in the Observer of the 1930 carnivals to see the size of the floats that were in the carnival round the town then. I don't expect they went round the Old Town, because they wouldn't have got round. But so the Old Town is unique. Each carnival in the world is unique. And the Old Town, if it wants its carnival, and if the businesses of the Old Town want the carnival, then we've all got to put our backs to the wheel and get it cracking.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I think on that note,
And
Bill?
At the end of it, I'd like to thank all the committees, not just this year's committee, last year's committee, the committees over the years that have kept the Old Town Carnival going. Our new committee here this year is no different. They've put a hell of a lot of work into it. Unfortunately, we can't have a carnival, but thank you all for the hard work that you put in. And let's hope that next year we renew our energies. We're rather like a tree that has been pruned. It looks a bit bare the first year, but the next year it should bear fruit. So we hope we're all around to see it. So look after yourselves, and we'll see you when we do.
Thank you. And thank you to both of you for the decades of enthusiasm and the training that you have given to so many generations in, as you say, in maintaining that tradition. And let's hope for the next generations to come it will flourish. Once it's been pruned, it'll come back, yes, twice as good.
Okay then, thanks very much.
Well, thank you. And hopefully see you in person very soon.
Okay,
One day.